February! I'm Cece, the registered dietitian here with Kanema Fitness. In honor of February being American Heart Month, we're going to discuss some ways to add more cardioprotective foods into your lifestyle, as well as go over ways to prepare your meals for the week. So in terms of planning out your meals for the week, I always like to get out a sheet of paper or use a whiteboard and plan out all of my days before going to the grocery store. So I just wrote on a piece of paper an M for Monday, and then T for Tuesday, and so on and so forth. And then I broke it up each day by each meal that I would want. And then usually on the sides, I'll write down extra food items that I would want for snacks throughout the day as well. And so this helps me stay a little bit more organized when I'm in the grocery store, but also gives me a good game plan of what meals that I want to have throughout the week, and then what things I can start prepping maybe earlier in the week to make my life a little bit easier throughout the week. So to start, my breakfasts are pretty easy. I prefer a lighter breakfast on the go, just because my mornings tend to be a little chaotic. So that's just my personal preference for my lifestyle. And so I usually stick to something easy, like a low-fat cottage cheese bowl, or a low-fat yogurt, or some egg bites that I have prepared. I usually make those a month in advance, and if you're not sure what I'm talking about, those were available in the video that I created for a few months ago. So you can look back on a previous video and you can find the recipe for the little egg white or egg bite frittatas, and they're super simple to make. You put them in the oven and then you can freeze them for some time. So those types of foods are the ones that I usually stick to, just because of the time that I have available during the weekend or weekdays. And then one thing that I like to do throughout my mornings, I try to change up, what I'm eating which day. So sometimes I will, on this piece of paper, write down which day I'm having which item, and that helps me ensure that, one, I have those food items available for each day, and I have enough quantity, but then it also allows me to add more variety into my meals and into each day, because you always want to add some extra nutrients and different nutrients into your days. So I always recommend switching things up instead of staying the same every single day. So that's a little bit about my breakfast. Going on to lunch, I'll usually keep things simple with leftovers, or I'll recreate leftovers. I sometimes will utilize prepackaged things in the supermarket, so things like a bag salad, I might utilize that and then add something to it to make it more of a complete meal. When I'm planning my meals, I always like to look to make sure that I hit all the check boxes, that it's a balanced meal. So using the example of a bag salad, that is typically not going to be a balanced meal. Most bag salads are going to just have, the lettuce and some extra vegetables, which is part of the reason why I do love it, is because it has a variety of vegetables in there. So it's a little bit more convenient for me than, chopping and dicing all the vegetables when I'm on a time crunch. So usually it's a lot of vegetables. Sometimes I'll have either nuts in it, or it'll have some sort of like a crouton, and depending on the type of salad it is. So that takes care of our fiber and our vegetable servings, and it has a little bit of carbs, but it doesn't have any protein. And then with the dressing, that adds some healthy fats, usually if it's oil-based. And sometimes I'll stick with the dressing in the salads. Sometimes I'll use my own dressing. Kind of depends on the dressing that's in the type of bag salad. Depends on the feasibility of me bringing side dressing on top of the dressing that comes in the bag, or kind of just depends on the day. So what I will always prioritize, though, is adding something else to that salad to make sure that it's a complete meal. Like I said, sometimes they do have like the croutons or some sort of carb added to it. Usually it's not enough carbs to make it count as a carb serving. And so what my go-to out of kind of laziness, honestly, is adding quinoa to it, because that serves as a complete protein and as a carbohydrate storage form. And a lot of times I'll either make my quinoa earlier in the week so I have it pre-portioned out and ready to go with me for work, for lunches, or sometimes I'll buy some pre-made quinoa from the grocery store in packages, and then all it needs to be done is heat it up in the microwave for like about 90 seconds and add it to my salad. And so those easy little changes can really make something as small as a salad a more complete meal and serve as a great lunch option when you're on the go and in a pinch. So like I said, sometimes I do those bag salads. Sometimes I'll use leftovers based off of what I'm having for the week. And then sometimes I will revamp my leftovers. I don't like wasting food, but like I said, I also like to have a variety of foods. One, because of the nutrient profile, I like to shape up what nutrients I'm giving my body. But I also like to change up what flavors I'm adding, because I get bored of the same thing too frequently. So sometimes I will, for instance, if I'm having pasta one night of the week, maybe I'll let the pasta cool and I'll store it in the fridge, and then I'll make a pasta salad out of it. So you can really utilize the food that you already have and you already cooked and prepared, and then just change it a few steps of the way, or maybe add a few more things to it to make it your own. So going through my list that I have for myself, like I said, I like to make this before going to the grocery store, so I have a game plan. Sometimes when you're in the grocery store and you're not sure what you want to get, that can create some confusion and make things a little bit more complicated. So having a game plan of what you want to do, what you want to get, and making sure that you get everything that you do need from the grocery store while you're there can save yourself a lot of time, money, and also set yourself up for success in a nutrition standpoint. Like I said, February is American Heart Month, so I want to gear kind of the food topics a little bit more towards heart healthy food options. And so with that, there's a few nutrients that come to mind when we discuss heart health. So first is saturated fat, and then we also have sodium. And then I also want to talk about adding extra fruits and vegetables because of their fiber content, and then their antioxidant properties. And last but not least, I'm also going to address omega-3 fatty acids. So first off, we have saturated fats and sodium. Both of these are going to be things that you want to look out for on a nutrition facts label. Like I mentioned in my meal planning tips, I really love utilizing easy, convenient foods. So sometimes I'll buy frozen vegetables, which is a great option when you're not sure, if you're gonna have enough time to prepare things, you're not sure if you have enough time to dice things up or chop things up. And most of the time I'll buy them, a couple weeks at a time, even if it's not on my schedule of me needing them. I just always like to have them on hand, because you never know if the vegetables that you did buy go bad, or if you didn't buy enough. It's nice to always have some vegetables, on hand, ready to go. So I am a big fan of frozen food items, but with that, we really want to pay attention to the nutrition facts label. Most food items that can be found in the frozen section of the grocery store are loaded with sodium. So we do want to pay attention to that nutrition facts label. With fruits and vegetables that are found in the frozen section, a lot of times, depending how they're prepared, but most of the time, they're going to be without sodium, and they're actually going to be at the peak time of harvest. So they're flash frozen right when they're picked while they're fresh in season, and they're going to have even more nutrients in them than, buying that fruit or vegetable from the produce section when they're out of season. So frozen fruits and vegetables definitely are something that are worthwhile to keep on hand, having in your freezer for when you're in a pinch, and they're not something to be afraid of, but just be mindful of the nutrition facts label. So in that nutrition facts label, like I said, we want to look for sodium and we want to look for saturated fat. Of course, it would be beneficial to look at the grams or the milligrams of these nutrients, but personally, when I'm in the grocery store, I don't really have time to look on the nutrition facts label for the milligrams and then use some calculations to figure out if it's low or high. And I just want a quick and easy yes or no answer. So that is when I refer to the percent daily value. The percent daily value is a nice little cheat tool to use when you want that yes or no. So if it is 5% or below, you are good to go. That means it is low in that nutrient, it is low in saturated fat, or it is low in sodium. So that means that it is something that's appropriate to purchase. If it is 20% or high, I want you to reconsider it. If it is something like ice cream or a frozen meal that you know it's going to be high in saturated fat or high in sodium, then really use moderation with it. Those food items are always going to be high in those nutrients. So like I said, just make sure that it's in moderation, and maybe rethink the frequency you're having it. If it's in between that 5% and 20%, I would like for you to try to stay as close to in between 10 and 5%. And but otherwise it is within your judgment whether or not that is something that you feel comfortable including in your diet. And that's going to depend on other risk factors, like if you are at risk of heart disease, or if you are trying to manage your heart disease, or it also depends on what the food is and what foods you're planning with it throughout the rest of the day and maybe the rest of the week. So like I said, if it is an ice cream product, which is going to be high in saturated fat, and it's 18%, wow, that's actually pretty low in saturated fat considering. If it is a frozen meal and you are so busy that week that you don't even have time to meal prep or figure out something else to do and you just need the convenience, that is totally fine. We're human. You're allowed to pick something because of convenience. And so if it is within that 5 and 20% range and it's just a little bit higher than you typically would like, that is okay. But then if it is something where there's options that are within your budget and options that are available to you and they're lower, then maybe consider the lower option. I always like to remind everyone when looking at the nutrition facts label, pay attention to the serving size, because that is what's going to get us. So when looking at the serving size, if you think that that's an appropriate serving for you, that's one thing. So you can take the percent daily value at face value. But if you think, oh, this is probably a third or half of what I'm actually going to consume, then maybe let's reconsider what the percent daily value is and reassess what it's actually going to be. So is it still going to actually be low in that nutrient? So we'll talk in a little bit about some of the dinners that I have prepared for this week, but one thing you'll see is that I do utilize canned foods, and that is something that I'm sure many of those that are familiar with low sodium nutrition education are probably a little weary about. But sometimes it's the convenience factor that is a little bit more important for my life in particular, and I will pick the low sodium option for the canned food, and it also does depend on what the food is. So for instance, this week I have canned beans planned because I don't have time to prepare the beans from scratch, and sometimes I will use dried beans, but in a perfect world that would be my option. But sometimes life gets in the way and I do have to pick the canned option. But like I said, I look for the low sodium option. And then one thing that you can do with canned food products is rinse it out. And so when you rinse the canned foods, it reduces the sodium by 50%. So when I'm picking the low sodium option, not only am I reducing the sodium that way, but I'm also rinsing it and then I'm reducing it further. So that's one way that you can watch your sodium with the canned foods. Okay, so we talked about things to try to limit in our diet, that being saturated fat and sodium, and now we're going to discuss things that we can add into our diet. So as you noticed, I recommended that you pay attention to the nutrition facts label for sodium and saturated fat, but some things that don't have sodium or saturated fat include produce. So, what might you think that I recommend including more into your diet? That's right, that's gonna be some fiber from fruits and vegetables and antioxidants that you get from fruits and vegetables. You know, those things that don't have nutrition facts labels. Those are things that we're gonna add into our diet a little bit more. And the last nutrient that I want to talk about in regards to heart health is omega-3 fatty acids. So we talked about reducing saturated fats, and foods that are high in saturated fats, of course, are going to be those processed foods and cake foods or bakery foods that use shortening, but also red meat. So that does kind of limit some of our protein sources. And ways to reduce the saturated fat includes getting leaner meat options. So when you are purchasing red meat, getting a leaner cut of it, and then also opting for skinless chicken instead of chicken with the skin. And then also what we can do is add in foods like salmon, which are not only a lean in terms of saturated fat protein, but it's also high in omega-3 fatty acids. So as you're adding that, for example, salmon into your diet, you are reducing the amount of saturated fat because it's essentially replacing one of the more saturated fat foods that you have in your diet, but you're also adding in omega-3s. So that can really help improve your cardiovascular health and help prevent cardiovascular accidents. And so those are kind of the brief bullet points about cardiovascular health. If you're interested in learning more, you can reach out to me and we will have more programming available for certain sites during this month regarding heart healthy lifestyles. And if you are interested in learning more about this, you can always reach out to me and I'm happy to discuss more in further details. Okay, so like I said, my meal planning tips are typically, using foods that are a little bit easier and convenient, so it makes for faster preparation. But I also like to reuse and revamp foods, so then I limit my food waste. So just going over kind of how I designed my meals for this week, I planned to, make my dinner for Monday night and then have those leftovers for Tuesday's lunch. And then Tuesday, I do have the time to make the dinner, so I am gonna prepare that dinner then, and then it's gonna be reused for lunch on Thursday. I'm spacing it out so I don't get sick of it, and but I still get to enjoy the food in time without it going bad. And then my Monday night's dinner is actually going to be revamped into my lunch for Wednesday. And that revamped lunch is going to be our recipe for this month. And then on Wednesday's dinner that I'm going to make, I am going to utilize that vegetable that I'm preparing and add it to my meal for dinner on Thursday. So then I have an extra vegetable with that. So I will put, an example of my meals for the week attached in a document with this video, so you can kind of get an idea, an example of how I plan my meals. Again, this is what this week happens to look like for me. Every week is so different, and every individual's needs are very different as well. My week to week will differ dependent on what foods I have in the freezer and the pantry, what foods I'm able to find in the supermarket, and everyone's nutrient needs differ based off of medical conditions and what your body actually needs in terms of energy expenditure and your resting expenditure rate as well. So this is not something that I would recommend to copy to a T, but it can give you some ideas. I said we are going to make a recipe today, and it's going to be a revamped version of one of my dinners. So my dinner for Monday night is planned pasta with frozen sausage and frozen vegetables. And so I'm using a chicken sausage for that dinner, and it's just a frozen sausage that I found from Trader Joe's, and it sounded good. And so I have a few left in the freezer, so I wanted to use that before they go bad. And then I also have some frozen vegetables, and I usually buy a few different frozen vegetable mixes. Some have Brussels sprouts and onions and squash. Sometimes they have broccoli, and kind of depends on what I'm able to find in the grocery store. But like I said, I always like to have some frozen vegetables on hand for easy cooking. And usually how I'll prepare them is I'll get a baking sheet, I'll line it with tin foil, and then I'll put the frozen vegetable contents on the baking sheet, still frozen, and I'll drizzle it with olive oil for some healthy fats. And maybe I'll add some pepper or some other seasoning depending on what the vegetables are. And I'll roast it in the oven at 450 for about 20 minutes. Most of the time I'll probably set the timer on for 15 minutes, check, and then go from there and, continue on at 5 minutes at a time. So that's my plan for Monday night's dinner, and that Wednesday lunch is going to be a revamped version of that, and it's going to be a pasta salad. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that salad, or take the pasta left over, and have it cold for lunch, and I'm going to add some chickpeas for my protein because I do not have enough of the chicken sausage to make it into the pasta salad. And then I'm gonna still keep the frozen vegetables that I used and have that in with the pasta salad. And then I'm gonna add some extra vegetables, and I'll also add some extra flavors to it. So yeah, we will go through that pasta salad recipe together, and it's a great balanced meal. You get some good carbs from the pasta. I typically try to do the whole wheat pasta because it is a little bit higher in fiber and has some extra vitamin B nutrients in it as well. I like to use chickpeas for a plant-based protein option in my meal, and it's pretty convenient, especially because I do utilize the canned chickpeas and just rinse them out before adding them to it. And then I'm using some leftover vegetables, and I'll add a few more vegetables to it, and voila, a complete meal. Okay, so for my dressing for my pasta salad, I'm going to make a lemon dill vinaigrette. So I'm going to juice 1 lemon and pour it into my bowl right here. Okay. And then I'm going to add some olive oil. If I can open this, there we go. Okay. And then I'm going to add some red wine vinegar. And then some white balsamic vinegar as well. And then I'm going to add in some dill. It smells so good. And I'll mix it all together and then have it ready for my salad when I'm ready to prepare it. Okay, so I have all of my ingredients chopped up. I have a bowl of spinach, and I'm gonna add my leftover roasted vegetables from the other night's dinner to this. So I have some roasted squash, roasted squash, roasted Brussels sprouts, and then some onions as well that were in that roasting mix. And then I also chopped up some bell peppers, and I chopped up some cucumbers. Okay, so I have all of my vegetables ready and prepared to add to my Tupperware. So I have a bowl of spinach already set, and I'm gonna add my roasted Brussels sprouts and roasted squash from the other night's dinner to this. And I also chopped up some bell peppers that I had in my fridge for some snack options. So I'm gonna add some of those chopped up bell peppers to this as well. And I also have, same thing, some chopped up cucumbers too. So I'm gonna add all of this to the bowl. And then I decided to add some banana peppers as well. I had a jar full of them in my fridge, so I wanted to use them before they went bad. So I'll add that to this as well. I put all of my dressing into a side little container just so that I can add it to my bowl when I'm ready to eat so it doesn't make it too soggy. And then I also am keeping the pasta separate because I don't want it to get too soggy before I'm ready to have it. So that way I can just assemble it when I'm ready to have lunch. And I am all set to go with my lunch for tomorrow from this leftovers and some vegetables that I had on hand. I hope you enjoy.